Lauren, good evening.
Hello.
How are you doing, my friend?
Yes, very good. Thank you. And yourself?
Doing very good, thank you. Doing very good. I'm glad that we finally managed to schedule this call after a little bit of a mishap related to internet yesterday.
Yep,
So,
the joys of technology.
indeed, cliche, right? Um,
hmm
but yeah, so Lauren, thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to have a conversation with you today, and I will allow you to introduce yourself. But first off, I want to start with a little comment, which is when I think of G4S, I think of myself walking down the high street and walking past a bank and seeing a G4S van on the side of the road with someone walking out in armored gear with like a briefcase strapped to them. And I'm probably completely underselling G4S and the scope and the capabilities of the business. So I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to ask you, if you may, to introduce yourself and explain in more elaborate terms what G4S actually does and who the business is.
Yeah, just to introduce myself. So I'm Lauren Denton. I have been the category lead for IT and technology with G4S for around about 8 months. So still relatively new into the G4S business.
Yeah.
But recently, G4S were acquired by Allied Universal in the US. And we are a leading security and facility service company, which wraps it up in a very, I suppose, small way. But
Yeah.
we cover a multitude of countries, 83 plus countries, 20 billion turnover, over 30,000, UK and I employees.
Wow.
And we looked after a bunch of different sectors, basically. So exactly what you described. So the man, which is our cash solution. So when they're picking up and transferring cash. So we do a lot of that with specifically within the UK and globally. Then we have the care and justice services. So and all of our prison services. So we run a number of prisons and all the facilities that sit within those. We also run security services as well for things like events.
Yeah.
So things like the Olympics, so manned guarding, as well as some facilities management, some kind of health services, and then also a lot of employment services and training as well. As you can imagine, our business is very focused on the man person type guarding, but we also provide a lot of services and training to enable people to actually achieve that as well. So a real mix of the things that you see on the street, but also probably a lot we do behind the scenes.
Yeah. So completely more than just a man walking down the street with a box of cash strapped to him. I didn't know anything about the training services. I didn't know anything about the prison service or anything like that. So I think you mentioned it's maybe 20 or 30,000 employees in the UK. What's the kind of scope globally for employees?
So I think it's around about 480,000 employees.
Wow.
Um, and that is, we have some that are full time, but we also do, on the books as we can call off people, for things like, events for like the Olympics or any other kind of festivals or any other kind of big engagements.
Yeah.
We have a bunch of people also, on the books for that as well. So really, that's what I say is it's a truly global business,
Yeah.
and has reach, in quite a lot of the top countries. Primarily, we talk about the UK and Ireland, but our biggest markets are the UK, but also, countries like South Africa,
Mhm.
in Kenya, we do a lot of there. And again, the markets are very different dependent on, what their requirement and need
Sure.
is.
Okay, so got a general idea of what G4S does now. So thank you for that, and you corrected me. So um, let's talk about like the general strategic direction. So what is going on at G4S right now? What's the direction of travel?
Well, G4S have acquired a number of businesses over the last couple of years, whether that's security businesses or other kind of areas, and they're really looking to grow, and be a real leader in the security services market. The purpose is effectively to safeguard customers and communities around the world, and they want to be the most trusted partner, and that is through enabling things in within organizations and delivering that, but also enabling, technology, bringing that through in smart tech, and enabling our customers to really kind of see the value that we can drive from not just the manned guarding, but also from technology as well.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of acquisitions going on over the last couple of years to, just expand your capabilities and drive that growth, but then also bringing through, I guess, new customer facing tech, which I'm not completely sure what that would be within the security environment, but I'm guessing that there may also be some like corporate technology which has come through, which is, to support all of that growth as well, right? And I quite often hear about things like through COVID with new technologies to support working from home or, cloud computing and stuff like that. Is there any specific like technology initiatives that you have been involved in that you've brought through over the last couple of years?
Well, one of I suppose the biggest one is we are a Google organization. So very different from that Microsoft, remit. And it's taken a long time for people to get used to that, new operating system. But by utilizing that, all you need is, a computer and, to go on to Google, and then you can log in, and it's very simple. So it makes, when we've got a bunch of staff out and about in the field, it makes lives a lot easier. So that is one of the biggest things, is that transition from Microsoft to Google. That was a huge project, and we've recently just re-signed the Google deal for the next 4, maybe 5 years. So that is I suppose a really big one for us, and our CIO, in conjunction with the team, did a brilliant job in bringing that forward. So it has, it's enabled people to have those interactions, to be able to, speak to each other a little bit more, because we are still an organization and a time where we're in that hybrid mode of working, so yeah. I go into the office a couple of days a week, for my sanity. But we also have the option of working from anywhere. And especially being a global organization, we do have people in different countries. Like I mentioned, South Africa previously, well, they have power cuts, every, few hours and things. And, that again can be a real concern. But when we've got the technology enabled, it still, and lets people do their jobs, whilst going through some of these difficulties in country as well.
Yeah. So to paraphrase there, and to pick some bits out of it, it sounds like the reason for I would say perhaps unifying on that single Google platform is because you now basically have all of your employees, from any device or location around the world. Basically, all they need is an internet link. They can log on to Google, and then they have access to literally every single service that they need, that, that complete Google suite, and they can continue working.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a really good tool, especially if you're working, I know a lot of people might complain about Google Sheets, but it allows collaboration as well. And that is a huge thing for G4S. We, as I said before, we want to be at the forefront of, being, smart technology enabled, and that enables, is just the beginning of enabling us to kind of activate that.
Yeah. And so that's a really interesting element of it, right? So super interested to hear about that. I'm interested to, the themes of collaboration and like work from anywhere are coming through. Is there like a phase 2, or maybe this is the phase 2 and there's a phase 3? Where do you see that kind of roadmap going? Do you see perhaps extending on Google services, or maybe, being able to be even more flexible in some ways? How do you see those themes of like collaboration and remote working, I guess, materializing in the future?
I think it's giving people options, and that is probably the biggest thing for us, is giving people those options and not tying them down to one specific, area in what they need to do. And I think, yes, phase 1 was, and I suppose almost to a degree, phase 2 was, getting Google in, making sure that it all works, making sure that we're a slick organization in that capacity. but also then enabling myself working with the technology team to look at other technologies which can support us in that approach. So whether that is, systems that, talk for the prison services, and technologies that go into there, and enabling, things like, AI, security solutions. All of that enables us to kind of deliver better for our customers, if we effectively are doing the POC internally, and then we're delivering it out to our customers at the end.
For sure. Okay, so that's super cool. Super cool. And thank you for sharing all of that. Sounds like, the Google, I say migration, but the Google plan is fully in flow. There's a lot of stuff that's going on around collaboration and working from anywhere and all those innovative technologies. But I'm quite interested as well to hear about your role, Lauren. So category manager, that's something I hear a lot of, but there's, for anyone that doesn't know what that means, what does that actually entail, your role?
Well, it entails a heck of a lot. But really, excuse me, I've been working in technology for around about 16 years in a procurement capacity. And part of, I suppose, looking at any category is to really, one, understand what we are purchasing, both internally and externally. So anything that we resell onto customers, to look at strategy. So, whether we are buying the most efficient, whether we are buying the right technology and solutions, and then also making sure that the commercials and the contracting is there, as well, so that both parties are protected. And I think procurement has come on a long way since when I first started, and it was very much us versus the supplier, and things like that. Whereas now, I mean, especially myself, we take a much more partnership approach, especially in technology, where the vendors that we are, employing to bring services in, they are subject matter experts. I'm not going to sit there and profess to say I know how to code, all these things behind the scenes, and understand that, these are what these guys, are there for. So it's really about working with, our partners, whether that's, on a telecom side, someone like a mobile phone provider, or, our fixed line providers, or then looking at the number of software that we use. You can probably imagine, being such a large global organization, we have X amount of ERP systems and we have X amount of HR systems, and it's enabling those things to talk to each other as well, and then making sure as well, then we're, like I sort of mentioned before, when we're bringing things internally, actually, is this fit for a particular customer? Is this a dynamic solution we can bring forward, to enable the customer to have a better journey? So I think anything that we do is really with that focus, but also looking at, sustainability options. So, sustainability is very high on the tech agenda, in looking at green technologies. And I think that's where category managers like myself, it's really our kind of, I suppose, role to be that kind of subject matter expert in that commercials. Do you know any other supplier that can provide X? I get questions like that a lot, and if you're not up to date with your knowledge, you don't want to be going and doing a Google search, which is easy and anyone can do it, but you're not necessarily going to get the right information for what you really need. So also it's about defining those requirements for the business as well, and making sure then I'm delivering whatever the business needs.
So couple of things that I picked out from there, which were really interesting. So it sounds like, well, you mentioned that procurement has moved to maybe like a more strategic and partnership approach rather than just butting heads and being us v them. Do you feel like you sit in the middle between the vendor, like a technology vendor, and perhaps the head of IT or the CIO, or the people who have that business requirement? Is it your role to sit in between those two elements, would you say?
Absolutely. Within G4S in particular, budgets are held centrally, within, the IT function, which is different to, like a finance organization or something like that. So anything that we do is delivered from a technology perspective. So from that CIO, You're saying this is what our strategy is, we need your support to be able to deliver this. But also in the same way, if I think that there's opportunity in a particular area, so if we're talking about software, if actually we're going and purchasing 300 bits of software from all these different vendors, actually, are we going out and buying the right solutions? Do we need to have all of those, different software providers on there? And are they fit for purpose? Can we do something different? Could we build something in-house, rather than utilizing, an external vendor? And things like that. So it really is, like you said, it's sort of sitting in the middle. And and at the end of the day, my role is to deliver, save money at the same time if I possibly can in the climate that we're currently in.
Yeah.
But absolutely it is to kind of sit in that middle and make sure that everyone's getting what they need.
Okay. And as well, another thing that I picked up on is that you mentioned, you have to have an understanding of the landscape of the technologies that you work in. And I'll be completely honest, maybe this is my arrogance or ignorance. I didn't come into this conversation thinking that the procurement and the category management team, were, I don't want to say tech savvy, but, had that responsibility to maintain a complete understanding of the landscape. Would you say that you were a technical person, or would you say that responsibility is more to understand, the themes that are going on within your category? How does that actually manifest itself?
I think it's a mix between the both. I think when you're in this position, there is no point turning up to a meeting to discuss, SaaS, solutions, a cloud system, and you have no idea what they're talking about. So you need to understand that, because how am I going to create the commercials, look at contracting, and actually then hand that over to sort of a supplier manager without that information to be able to deliver. So I will say there's no such thing as a stupid question. I will ask questions to my heart's content and probably frustrate half the people in the room that are techies, but I don't mind doing that, because I think it's really important to understand what I'm purchasing. If I don't, and I go into some of these conversations, one, we might not be getting the right solution for ourselves, and two, we're definitely not going to be paying the right price for it.
Sure.
So I think it's really important, but also to say I'm not a I'm not a technical person. I'm pretty good on generally like common sense technology. Used to mess around with computers when I was a kid and things like that. But when these brilliant people that work in this day in day out, they have trained for years to do all of that stuff. I'm just kind of the one there supporting them in that way. But I think it is really important to understand what you're purchasing, and if it's the same as if you were doing, the stationery category, you need to understand, what pens people like and, what that looks like. And you need to do the same in technology. You need to understand, whether it's an on-premise solution or whether it's a cloud technology, what is going to be fit for the business. Where does that data go? GDPR was great fun when it came in, and people panicked, a lot. But in technology, a lot of that's been done already. So because you do need to know where your data is going, need to know where it's being stored and things. So it wasn't as, I suppose, stressful at the time when that happened for me, because we were already doing that, assessing the risks and things like that. So it's a real kind of mix, but, really enjoyable at the same time.
Well, the last question that I wanted to ask of you on this topic is, I know, we kind of have an understanding of the role of procurement, right? But when do you typically find yourself being engaged by the business? So what I mean by that is, the business has identified a requirement, maybe for, to fill a gap or for some new SaaS solution. Are you engaged right from the outset, where they're speaking to vendors, they're, going through and getting technical requirements, they're building these capability lists? Or do you typically find yourself being engaged when a decision has been made, that bill of materials has been created, they've decided they want to purchase something, and now they're coming to Lauren and saying, can you help us purchase this? Where do you usually come in on that continuum?
Ideally, it would always be at the beginning. So when that initial idea comes around and we're going to want to look at technical capabilities, I always say it's best to engage procurement then. One, because we need to understand, what those requirements are, whether you need support with a tender process, for example. I've got a wealth of experience in doing all of that, and, can help support in getting the right information out there, but also knowing the right suppliers to go to. But then also it's things like, if you're putting a tender out, and that is something I did at a number of other organizations, put generic contracts on there so that we can start filling out those bits of information prior to kind of having that, because especially when you're negotiating tech contracts, they can be quite complex. And unfortunately, I have known in some other organizations, not so much at G4S, where it has taken a year to 2 years to negotiate a contract.
Wow.
So if you then come to procurement after the fact, when you actually need something in, and then it takes you 2 years from then to, negotiate, you've already cut off probably 8 months of work that you're doing.
Yeah.
So if you engage at the beginning, it enables us to kind of really ensure that, one, we're getting things out there and it's not taking up too much time as well, because these projects are, complex, risky, and you need to make sure that, the protection is there for both parties, not just for yourselves.
It's transformative stuff that we're working on, right? This is big stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really is. And especially within, I think, in that tech space, it is across, to be honest, a lot of different spaces now. But in a tech space, I think it's really important to have that initial engagement up front, so that everyone's getting the right support that they need.
Okay. So that's a very nice segue into a different topic, which is going to be around your engagement with vendors and salespeople and marketing people and that kind of thing. So you mentioned there that in an ideal scenario, you are engaged in an engagement with a vendor as soon as possible. And vendors will, I guess, try and reach out to you on many occasions to try and get their foot in the door, or to, try and share a hypothesis that they have of how they can help G4S. Is that something that you do personally experience? People coming, trying to book in meetings with you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's always been the case. But I'll be honest, since joining G4S, I have more than I've ever had. I think G4S being such a global organization and having all these different countries, my name's been leaked out there wonderfully. And I do get a lot of, what I class as new business requests. So it probably happens, 5-6 times a week. So, fairly regularly.
And because you like being engaged early on, would you ever consider, or do you ever take any of those introductory calls to learn a bit more about a technology? Or do you feel that first initial meeting, that's still too early for you to be engaged? It probably should be with like a technical team.
It really does depend, on what it is. So there's things, for example, on cybersecurity. Now, cybersecurity has been a little bit of a passion of mine, and has been for sort of 5 years or so. Did it in a previous life as well. And that is huge at the moment. The amount of, ransomware attacks that are happening, DDoS, malware, all of that kind of stuff. So again, that's very much high on the agenda is cyber risk. So when people will reach out, with things that potentially are on my radar, then yes, I would have those initial conversations with them. And I think it's about piquing interest as well. So, those introduction emails that come through, if I read them, they're quite generic and they're not really kind of, hitting the spot, then unfortunately they might not be suitable for now, but I always keep it in a file. And, if later down the line, potentially there's a possibility, then I, have some info to go back on, or if someone says to me, do you know a CCTV software, security company, I can say, well, actually, yes, someone emailed me three months ago, and I've got that information for you. So it really just depends on what my focus is at that point when things come in.
Okay. So really interesting. And this is, really, really great stuff. So I'm interested to know, you mentioned there that you will take an introductory call, and, it's typically you take an introductory call because your interest has been piqued, and because there's something on your radar right now that, matches to the content of that email. So I'm interested to find out, how does someone PK your interest? What does that actually look like in an email? Is it because there's an interesting reference, they're working with another security company? Is it because they've really done their homework on you personally and the business, and they sound like they know what they're talking about? What actually will, pique your interest in that initial email?
I think for me, it's one, making sure that the subject matter is correct. The amount of times I've had things that come through that maybe isn't necessarily technology, or IT focused, that actually would be directed to somebody else, for facilities, for example, just because there might be a small amount of technology that sits in there doesn't necessarily mean that it's my remit. But then when something piques my interest, it is a case of, one, I like quite bold, brazen, stuff. We think we have the best thing ever for you. Okay, great. Well, that's a bold statement to make. Let me see if I can, prove you wrong, or if I can break something, or whatever.
Yeah.
One of the funniest actually I ever had was a lady that I believe she was an actress on Emmerdale. And she sent an email, and it was basically like, my TV career's dried up, so now I'm supporting my husband's business, and this is what we're kind of doing. Here's some information, but if you are not interested, here's a bunch of old clips from me from in Emmerdale, like, have a nice day. And it was very light-hearted, random, but it made me laugh. And I thought, the fact that someone has gone to this length to put all of this together, to be humorous about it and everything, it piqued my interest, that I thought, well, I'll give that person a call. They've put in a lot of effort to doing that, rather than copying a body of a message and actually not relating to G4S, looking at actually what I do or what G4S does. If you're coming to me and saying, I've got some technology for a checkout, well, that's retail, not me. So it's really about doing your homework as well. G4S's website is very good, actually. It really does explain a wealth of what we do as an organization, and all of our code of conduct, and what our supplier kind of process is. So I'd say to anyone, take a look at that, and kind of get that information, and then feed out to the right people, because it is, you just need to provide the right information. Sometimes it can be luck of the draw, provide it at the right time. No one knows what I'm working on. But I think it's that, initial engagement, and make it snappy. Don't send me a 6, page email that I have not got the time to read. Make it short, sharp and snappy. And it's definitely then, it's up to me to then, either pick up the phone or respond to a mail, and things. And we do that as an organization. I don't ever kind of leave things blank. If it's not necessarily in my remit, I will also pass that on to colleagues as well, and vice versa. So one of my leaders within my team, he sends me quite a lot, because I think people are quite good at getting in and speaking to him on the phone. So he's always passing things on. So it's a really good collaboration approach, which works really well.
And I guess many salespeople may not get replies to their emails, but what they don't see is the act that you just described, where someone from the senior leadership team will actually see something that piques their interest, and they will hand that off to you for you to validate and explore further. So that sales email, it has hit a chord, and it has been spread throughout the organization. It's just not emitted a response yet, so to speak. There's
exactly. And sometimes these things can take time. If I'm heavily involved with a particular telecoms project, and something comes in about software, unfortunately, with the way things are, I won't have that ability to be able to respond straight away.
Yeah.
But I will have the ability to have that conversation with somebody, or speak to someone and find out if that's something that potentially we're interested in, or is anybody else interested in finding out about this. Not even necessarily category specific, but it's also about development. I've got probably some juniors within the team that might want to do technology at some point. So actually it's sometimes passing it to them and say, do a bit of due diligence on this, and do you think this would be a good fit for G4S? So we do a lot of things behind the scenes. We probably just as procurement people, we're not very good at shouting about it. We just kind of sit there in our silos, get on with the work, and then occasionally poke our heads up. But we're not I think procurement is opposite to sales. We don't get a lot of recognition for what we do, but we do a heck of a lot.
So the last question I'll ask on this, Lauren, and then we'll wrap up. So, we've heard a lot of things about what you like to receive and the content that you like to have and what piques your interest. Is there anything particularly which really pees you off and that will completely turn you off of a vendor?
If you email me continuously in the same week. So give it a couple of weeks. If I haven't responded, to that first, please don't email another 5 times within that same week, because one, I definitely don't have that amount of space in my inbox to keep receiving these. But two, it's genuine. It's, we've not responded because not interested. It's because it might not be right at the time, or we're doing some internal due diligence. So I think that's always something to be mindful of for people, is you're not necessarily being ignored, but just give it a bit of time. So that's always a bit of a difficult one if you're constantly being chased about something, and especially if it's not particularly relevant to what you're doing at the time. All I can do is respond and go, no, sorry, this is no good, and things. But I don't want to do that, because, as I said, I keep things in a new business request file, so that if my colleague turns around and says, oh, actually, did you know anyone that does X, Y, and Z, I can say, yeah, of course, no problem. Wasn't right for me, but it might be right for somebody else.
Yeah. Well, Lauren, I've garnered more insights in the last 32 minutes than I don't know how long. So thank you so much for being so open and charismatic and honest with your advice and your insights. I'm probably gonna offer you something which you may regret doing, but if there's anything like particular technologies that G4S is looking for right now, well, there's anything particularly that you wish you had help with, if there's any spaces in your teams that you're trying to hire, is there anything that you maybe want to spend the last minute or so on the call to share? If not, no problem at all.
Yeah, I think, for me, as a sort of, I mentioned software, it's a kind of a real thing. And with the fact that, G4S has quite a lot of niche, software, whether it's for prison services or for the cash services, I think it's always good to hear, from people where they're working in those spaces, because they are very niche. And we don't always have the expertise, in-house to be able to do that. But there is, a lot of, things that are going to be going on over the next, 3 to 5 years. Our industry is ever changing. So it's always good to have, looking at, are there software resellers out there that can actually help us, in rationalization, and really, kind of understanding that. Is there a technology that, can sit on our system that can go and, effectively do a bit of a technology audit? Where do we have licenses? Where do we have, fixed lines that aren't being used? All of these different things. And it isn't just for the UK, as I said, it's international. So there is, an opportunity, I think, for anyone that comes into G4S and is able to work with G4S. We are opening a door to not just the UK business, but also the international business as well, which is, a really great opportunity. And it's very dynamic. It's, I think some of our values are to be agile and innovative and reliable. And we want to work with those kind of people. So if there are, companies out there that feel that they would be a good fit in that kind of space, absolutely, we're always looking for the next good technology so that we can deliver that to our customers.
Okay. So cue your inbox about to absolutely blow up when this goes live.
Fine. Don't worry, I'll wait there. I'll set a rule, you know, it'll go into there, and I'll have to set a whole day aside to go through it all.
The new business folder is going to be overflowing.
Yes, it is. But as I said, you know, there is so much new technology that comes out, and I will never profess to know, you know, everything. You know, I attend a lot of conferences. You know, I went to Green Tech a little while ago, and it's so interesting finding out these new things that are out there and how they can support, you know, the G4S business globally, because it really, you know, is very important, you know, to have those efficiencies and to deliver for our customers, especially when you're dealing with people, you know, at the end of the day as well.
Well, Lauren, as I said, thanks so much for coming and joining us on the Infrastructure Podcast. That was, truly insightful. Great to have a conversation with you. And I look forward to catching up again soon.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. Really great to speak to you.
Cheers. Thanks, Lauren.
Bye.